a cohesive team. I thought that was a unicorn, a bit of an illusion.
Confusion is ugly, undermines teamwork and cohesion and kindness by its nature.
My first kick of the cat, if that's the phrase,
kick of the cat.
Was
yeah, I hope you don't
can.
kick the cat. Don't kick the cat. We're animal lovers.
Welcome to the Serious Playfulness podcast, where we explore the work of building healthy, mission-driven organizations that don't suck the life out of you. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Stephanie. And if you secretly dream of a workplace that you actually want to go to, then you're in the right place. Let's get to work.
Steph and I are going to talk about the leader or business owner or executive who has a very difficult time leaving, truly detaching on a vacation, whose phone rings too much, who is needed for too many things perhaps, and how you can be aware of if that's an issue and some things you can do to solve it. So we've titled this How to Go on Vacation, and the idea is to unpack the healthy ways by which you can really be free from work for a time for all kinds of good reasons.
Yes. And actually, I mean, vacation, certainly we want you to have a vacation, but this solution and this issue will affect all of it. Your evenings, your weekends, even your workday, if you're constantly being interrupted because your phone's buzzing and your staff are grabbing you for questions, it all roots down to the same problem. And that's what we're going to dive into.
Wonderful. And maybe we start with some of the reasons why leaders can get into these kind of traps of being too needed. I think one is in growing organizations when, let's say you've founded something, whatever it is, company, nonprofit, and you've had to do everything. And you're therefore accustomed to being involved in everything. But as the system grows, you have to learn how to have systems that are less dependent on you, to have delegation structures whereby people know what to do independently of you, and to create a lot of clarity, which we'll talk more about clarity. But the idea is simply that it can't all depend directly on you. And that will become a real bottleneck for all kinds of things, which of course will affect your ability to not be working. And what are some other reasons why a leader might fall into this stuff that you can think of?
Well, we tend to put out the biggest fire, and our days can fill up really quick putting out fires. When would you find the time to do the clarity work necessary to clearly delegate, to tidy up what your team can do? What kind of decisions can they make? What's their authority and responsibility? And doing that work, which pays dividends, but it pays dividends on another day. But to find the time and to carve out the intentional time to say, look, we need to tidy this up. Because always coming to me with questions, it's going to be terrible for everyone involved. The employee, they don't want to do this. They don't want to keep going up to the boss or asking their leader for clarity on decisions. That doesn't feel good. They don't feel empowered to do their job. They're confused about their job. That's why they're asking. And for the leader, the owner, it's the same. Who wants to be pestered all day long when maybe you recognize, hey, there's other work I can be doing, but I'm always bogged down into the weeds. So how do you end up here? It's hard to protect time to do that work that's necessary so that tomorrow is less chaotic than today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're touching, in other words, on the idea of working on the system versus just in the system. I think that's a Stephen Covey-ism, which is so tempting to not do because it takes diligence and patience, and it's not putting out a fire. It's not urgent, and nor is it particularly fun. It can be sort of just not fun. And so those who are maybe hooked on adrenaline and new challenges, you have to fight that urge. It's another argument also for having regular off-site context type meetings where you can step away and look at how the whole thing operates and how the team operates. I think another thing that is implicit here is we're really touching partly on reasons why leaders don't delegate as much or as well as they could, because that's ultimately the solution, right? As you say, having clarity about what other people are responsible for, have authority for, and then trusting that. I think implicit in that is that things won't go perfectly or the way that you might handle them or do them. And there's a kind of death to self, to use a scriptural metaphor in this, where you have to realize that it will maybe not be the way that I would like, and or I'm not going to directly be involved. all the time, but that's okay because we can't be that essential in everything, or else it's going to be very limited, very frustrating. And there's a kind of trust in other people that this implies and demands. There's also sort of a trust in God that things will kind of work out, that he's around, if you will. He's present and with us and good. And so it's a reminder that leadership is not about us, right? It's about other people and actually helping other people, equipping them to, and finding people who are capable of working with us, and that so that they can be successful, in which hopefully everyone benefits and wins.
Yeah. And there's lots of reasons that we'd be tempted to avoid this. The circumstances, the busyness, when would you find time? Then there's the risk, like you said, that, well, wait a second. If I let someone else make a decision, I lose control. It might turn out differently than the way I would want it.
Mm-hmm.
What if that's catastrophic? and maybe it even hints to, will I be important still? Do you think there's a layer there where we might really enjoy, as annoying as it is, because sometimes we actually want some peace and quiet, but is there a little hint underneath for some perhaps that say, man, I really like it that I am so important and pulled into things that maybe are more appropriate to hand off to the team, but I still like to be involved. And that would speak to identity.
Excellent point. And I'm thinking of a team I worked with where this was exactly happening. There was someone who was an operations person who historically was involved in basically everything. And as there was not a really clearly defined team, and I think maybe in prior leadership, they had a new leader at this point. This was tolerated because the person did a lot of things that were very helpful with a good intention. But a new leader came in who wanted to be more involved in directing things. And there was a nice team that was being developed under this new leader. And that tendency, that person started to really cause problems because basically her hand had to touch everything. And I think it was because of a well-meaning but disordered need to be needed.
Yeah.
It was a kind of, if people don't come to me, then maybe who am I? What am I? And I wasn't aware of the depths of this heart of the person. But I think you're right. I think all of us can be tempted to be, we seek identity in something. And if it's not ultimately God, it's maybe in our work. And that's a concrete example of it. So if that's something that you wonder about yourself, that would be good to examine that carefully, because if you feel you must be needed in work, it's not great for you and not great for the people around you, because it's going to cause other people to basically feel like you're controlling, because you kind of are probably.
Yeah, you are. I think you probably are being in that instance. And it takes then a courageous leader, owner, to tackle this, to dive in and say, I recognize I can't do it all. By attempting to do it all, I'm not only harming our results, but I'm hindering our team and their satisfaction in the work, and there's going to be consequences to that somewhere. I'm probably messing with my family life. If this doesn't come up, I'll just be the innocent stranger who says, I guarantee you, your spouse does not like this. If your phone's ringing at 6:30 p.m. and you're at the dinner table, this is a problem. So the bold, courageous leader says, okay, I know this is not working. Now what? So let's explore that. Now what? And we kind of hinted to it, if clarifying what can be delegated. But I really want the listener to be clear on to what level. How do I move out of this? Where would we start?
I think starting with the authority of your people to make decisions. But probably even before that, we have to get really clear on, I think it would be authority and what you can make in decisions, but also the strategy of the company too, or the nonprofit, of what's our unique approach to being effective, so that if a sort of strategic type of decision is needed, the person doesn't have to wait for a team meeting necessarily. So as much as we can be clear on that. on uniquely how you approach doing work well?
Let's give an example of that before we move on. Let's take the Southwest Airlines. It is just such a great example, and I know we've used it before, but they are exceptional with being user friendly and being accommodating. We hear the stories of someone who's scheduled for a flight at 5 p.m. and they arrive at 2 p.m. trying to get on the earlier flight, and they're just said like, yeah, you've got a ticket for a later flight, come on in. We've got it, there's they know that their strategy is happy customers and being that kind of easy experience. So the person at the gate does not need to now make a strategic phone call or discuss anything. They know if we can delight our customers, we're going to do it.
Right.
So you're here early and there's a flight leaving to your destination, come on board.
Yes.
That is an example of what you're saying about the strategy. A lot of businesses haven't done the work to clarify really what is our approach. And
Yes.
once we have answered that, then our team knows, like, let's say the person at the gate, they know, oh, we can just accommodate. That's our thing.
Yes.
And so they have the freedom and the confidence to say, yeah, I'm allowed to do this. It's within our scope. It's within our strategy. Come on board, literally. Get on the plane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a good one. And I think another would be, because sometimes there are budget implications for decisions. So clarifying for your people, what can they decide that costs money that they don't have to either wait or consult you on? And I worked with another team once years ago where there had never been any delegation of budget spending. It was all centrally controlled and dependent on the top executive. And this was in a nonprofit setting. And the result was that everything had to go to that leader, which led to the phone calls, the texts, what have you, and also a lack of, I think, maturity and a lack of ability for some of those leaders to lead as much as they could. And I think there was potential for, I don't know if resentment's the right word, because everything was well-meaning and
yeah, I could see resentment brewing there for sure.
it's
like
certainly
I'm at
possible, right?
Staples, and I'm here to pick up the printer paper, and I recognize that we actually also need ink, but the ink wasn't approved. Like, could you imagine being like, well, gotta call Joan and get the ink approved?
Right.
It'd be maddening.
Right. Or you can have maybe the leader decides to do all the staple runs, right?
Yeah.
When that, assuming you have people, you have delegates, that could be given to somebody else.
Yeah.
So back to the question of what can you do is clarification of what can people do on their own, and clarification of strategy, which informs certain decisions too. And all of which takes discipline, because you have to think that through and then communicate it and hold people accountable to it. I think we've talked about the internal thing is you have to be willing to be less needed, and you have to sort of crush that idol, if I can call it that, if that's a part of your heart and your life. You can't worship work because it's not God. And there's also, there could be a implicit laziness where you just haven't wanted to make the effort to have those conversations. So we have to be mindful of that. And also maybe a mistrust of other people's competency. Now, let's assume you've hired or recruited volunteers as well who are capable. So let's assume you've done that kind of upstream work well. Just think about it. Why are you really going to conclude that people can't make certain decisions and do things? If that's who are competent and trustworthy, if that's true, guess what you're communicating to them is that you think that they're not maybe competent or trustworthy. So be careful of what your actions convey. And the solution there is to choose to trust that you've found trustworthy people and kind of get out of the way.
Yeah. And I've been guilty of this myself. I have had a team where I was noticing I'm getting way too many questions about things that I would like other people to handle, but I had never taken the time to clarify, this is very clearly your scope. This is your budget for that scope, which is what we're talking, the staple analogy, but put a dollar
Yes.
figure on it. You can spend this much money on anything in your department. And, or, you have this much wiggle room on a margin or expense. This is your scope. And I don't need to hear anything about it. I trust you with this budget and this target, this goal, this area of responsibility. And then the person, the owner or the manager here, they can oversee it. If you're having professional development check-ins or quarterly meetings with someone where you're checking on their role and their responsibility, you can check on how is the budget thing doing? We're going to have to know that you're still within this range, but it is not that tedious, relentless questions that can be clarified in a pretty simple meeting to say, here's your role, here's the budget to achieve it, these are the decisions you can make, these are the decisions I want you to bring to me. This type. And it could be anything related to do with this customer. The customer is way too sensitive. I want him to be involved. Or at a price point, or, clarify that and then let them go.
What do you think, Stephanie, of the idea that some leaders say, I can't not check my email when I'm on vacation? Ooh. Is that ever defensible, do you think? I've certainly worked with some people who are always kind of available if really needed. Sometimes the nature of the work, because it's just super fast and evolving.
I think this can be solved by clarity. One, I don't buy it. Why? Because if you foresee something coming up, you've got a team. That's why you've hired people. And be clear with that. Here are the circumstances in which you can ring my phone. I'm only going to answer if it rings. And I'm going to answer it because I know it's going to meet one of these criteria. That this or this happens, then that constitutes an emergency. I want to be interrupted. I'm willing to be interrupted. But to the person who's checking their email daily in their personal time, I think there are underlying problems. Either, I'll be direct. It could be addictions to phones, that little endorphin kick that we get when we get things popping up in notifications. These are socially acceptable problems that, we shouldn't tolerate. We want to be growing out of that. And then, lack of clarity. If something, even have someone else check your email. We have a lot of technology that can do that. You're on holidays, delegate to someone else, check my emails, and if this certain situation, this one and this one happens, then you phone me. Don't send me an email because that means I have to keep checking it to notice if there's an urgency.
Now there are circumstances and nuances in some of this, so we can't. Anyway, that goes without saying. Yeah. I think also it can be totally appropriate to say your delegate is checking your communications to say a customer or a donor or someone. Joe, CEO Joe, leader Joe is on vacation. And so can we get back to you in 2 weeks?
Yes.
I think that communicates something that reasonable people will generally respect that. Yeah. And also, let's keep in mind that if the leader isn't able or willing to do that, it's setting the tone that others aren't also. That you're not really free to necessarily check out. Yeah. And I think it's a very important example to set that my family life, my restorative time away from work is actually essential to me and also to the work, because I can come back refreshed and ready to go. I'm sure, well, I haven't looked at the data, but I'm sure good research has been done on this. I guess I won't speculate because I don't know. That you're better back at work if you've truly been able to unplug away from work.
Right. And here's a challenge for the leader owner who's listening to this. And maybe, it's winter here right now. I hope you're getting away somewhere warmer than it is here. So let's anticipate you've got time away coming up. What would I do? Well, like we've covered, delegate some time to look at this and be clear with your team around any of the things that you can foresee coming down the pipe while you're away. Get as clear as you can. Clarify what are the phone call worthy things that you want to be brought to your attention while you're away. And then, if there's no real major things on the table, I would say test it. test it. Go on the holiday, resist the emails, wait for a phone call, and then when you get home, get back to your office, use it as a diagnostic tool to say, well, what fell through the cracks? Well, George didn't know how to make decisions about that. Excellent. Now we know a place that needs clarity.
Yes.
And you can use it as a way to troubleshoot where are the gaps that require more attention and solve that. Instead of, you'll never be able to diagnose that if you're forever in the system of I'll answer, I'm available at all times.
Excellent. Maybe do it on a vacation that's a week long, not 3, if you're just kind of getting used to this. or just take week 1 of your vacation and then dip in to kind of spot check a little bit if it's really new in doing this for obvious reasons. Let's leave it there. It's been good to talk this through, and we hope that those listening will find practical ways to be able to get away for their good, the good of the organization, and the good of their people. Thank you.